Masechet Sanhedrin, Daf Gimel. We began analyzing the first clause of the Mishnah that says monetary laws you need 3 judges. And then it went and specified that for robbery and injury you need 3. Now why do you have to specify anything? If you just said monetary laws are 3, then it should be that all subcategories of monetary laws you require 3. So why bother mentioning, gezelot, chabalot specifically is 3? So we already saw the first answer. We're going to see another one today. But first, we'll finish discussing this first answer by the Abhu. And he says it's talking about mahen. First, it gives a general category, dinei mamanot. But then it says specifically, not everything that's monetary law requires 3, but specifically a subcategory of robbery and injury. But that, it means to exclude loans and admissions. Now, does that mean that for loans and admissions you don't need 3? No, because the Abu himself says that you require 3. Rather, here's the difference, that for loans and admissions, one does not require the judges to be expert judges. Even lay people can be judges. Whereas, for injury and robbery, it requires 3 judges that are experts. That's where we left off, and now we ask, Mai kasabad? I kasabad eruf parshiot katuv kan, leba'enami mumchin. Vi kasabad en eruf parshiot katuv kan, shelosha lamal. The source that from which we learn that you need 3 judges comes from a law of theft, where someone deposits an item with a shomer, and then he says, no, it was stolen, I don't have it, and doesn't have to pay. And it says here, we're going to see 2 ways to actually derive the 3, but it says, El ha-Elohim, so they will come, and this means judges, and the next pasuk it says, Ad ha-Elohim a second time, and then the third time, Asher yashi'on Elohim. So it does say the word Elohim 3 times here, and as we're going to show, we learn the law that you need 3 judges from this repetition. Now, I know this is talking about robbery. A Gemara elsewhere in Baba Kama says these words over here, Asher yomar ki hu zeh, that he says, this is it, right? This is what I owe, but not something else, that we derive from here the law of modeh b'miksat regarding loans. Even though this paragraph is not about loans, it's about thievery, but the rabbis say that there is a mixture here of parsha, a mixture of subjects, and these words are in fact talking about loans, that regarding loans, if I deny the entire loan, I don't have to make a vow. If you don't have proof, and I say, no, I don't owe you anything, I don't have to make a vow. But if you claim I owe you $100, and I say, Ki hu zeh, I owe you 50, but I already paid the other 50, then I have to make a vow. Ad ha-Elohim yavor devar shenehem. So, if you say that indeed this paragraph is talking about not only robbery but also loans, well then the law should be the same. So then you should require expert judges as well. And if you think that this paragraph is not mixing issues and is not talking about theft, not talking about loans at all, but only about theft, well then who says you need 3 judges at all? In other words, either the law is the same or it's not the same. If this paragraph applies to both theft and loans, the law should be the same, and you should require 3 expert judges. And if this paragraph is not talking about loans, then don't require even 3 judges for loans. So how do we answer it? A very important statement. Lo'olam kasabat eru parshiot katuv kan. In fact, we do think that this paragraph is talking about both subjects. Ubedinhu delib'ayanami mumchin. And therefore, on the deoraita level, you would require 3 expert judges for loans. V'hai dela ba'ayanan mumchin mishum delebi chanina damar bi chanina devar Torah echad dinei mamonot v'echad dinei nefashot bedrisha u'bachakira shene'amar mishpat echad yeh lachem. And the reason why we do not require 3 judges, expert judges for loans, is actually a d'Rabbanan. This is an amazing case of the rabbis coming and undoing a deoraita law, which is a lot easier to do when you talk about monetary law, because the rabbis can decide hefker betin hefker, and they can decide that this money belongs to this person and not that person. But still, this is very significant. According to Torah law, proper procedure is that you need 3 expert judges in all cases. As Rabbi Chanina said, according to Torah law, both for for monetary law and for capital punishment, you need dirisha and chakira. This is serious interrogation of the witnesses. We separate the witnesses and we ask them not only basic questions like, who did the murder, with what weapon, and so on, when and where, but also other questions like, what were they wearing? What was, other aspects that have nothing to do with the crime directly, but if you were there, you would know, and that way we can look for any discrepancy. If they're making up their story, then they wouldn't remember what kind of shoes was he wearing, and so on. And so that is required across the board. As the pasuk says, there's going to be one law for everything, meaning both for capital punishment and for monetary law. That's the Odoraita law. However, but then the rabbis came and they said, you know what? We're going to distinguish between capital punishment. There, yes, you need to do dirisha and chakira. And in order to do dirisha and chakira properly, you need expert judges. Only they know how to do that. And so for capital punishment, we want to be 100% sure before we go and execute someone. So there you need it. However, for monetary law, the rabbis saw that it's better to do away with the high level of interrogation. We'll do basic interrogation. You still have to say, yes, I saw this person. He lent money to that person, right? They have to give the basics of the law, but that's it. We don't interrogate them too much. And therefore, since we don't need serious interrogation, we don't need expert judges. Now, why are we downgrading the requirement for monetary cases? So that the door will not be closed before lenders, borrowers. If a borrower comes and says, I want to borrow money, if the lenders know, even with witnesses, the lender says, if the guy denies it, I'm going to have to bring the witnesses. And then I'm going to come to the judges, and the judges are going to give the witnesses such a hard time with dirisha and chakira and ask them a million questions and find some discrepancy, and then I will never get my money back. And so it's actually bad to have too high a level of a requirement of evidence and of interrogation of the judges, because borrowers weren't getting money. So it was not in interest of the borrowers or the lenders. And so therefore the rabbi said, you know what? Torah law, we're suspending, and we're going to say you don't need the dirisha and chakira, and therefore lay judges are sufficient for loans. Okay, now we ask about that. There's a general rule that expert judges, certified judges, if they make a mistake, what sometimes people make mistakes, then they are exempt. You don't make the judge pay if he made a mistake. However, if a layperson decides that he's going to act like a judge, and he makes a mistake, then that layperson does have to pay out of pocket. Because what business does he have in judging a case? We want to discourage people from going to laymen, and therefore we discourage laymen from acting like judges, because we say, if you make a mistake, you're going to have to pay. And now that's the general rule. So now, what you're going to say that, but now, since you just said that the official rule is that the rabbis made is that lay people can be judges in these cases of loans, so since you gave them authority to do that, are you going to tell me that if they make a mistake, they don't have to pay like expert judges? So we say no. We're not going to go that far, because kol sheken natanu avdelut bifnei lovin, because then for sure lenders will not want to give any money to borrowers, because if the lay people who don't really know what they're doing, if they think that when they make a mistake they don't have to pay, they're not on the line, then they're going to do a bad job, and the lenders are going to be like, I'm not lending you money, because then you're going to get some lay judges and they're going to say things that they don't know what they're talking about, and they're going to say you paid but you really didn't pay, so I'm not giving you money. So therefore, while the rabbis do say to make it easier to find such judges, and you don't need dirisha and chakira, so that way it'll be easier for people to go find judges, and they won't need dirisha and chakira, and they'll be able to collect their money. But they do want these lay judges to have skin in the game, that if they make a mistake, then they'll have to pay. So at least these lay judges will do a good job. So they don't have to do the dirisha chakira, but they have to do a good job, and we ensure that by making them pay if they make a mistake. Ihachi tarte katane dine monot bishlosha hedyotot gezelot achabalot bishlosha mumchin. Okay, all that was Rabbi Abahu's reading, and now we're going to challenge it. It doesn't fit so well in the wording of the Mishnah, because in fact, if that's how you read it, then it should say all that specifically. You're reading a lot into the Mishnah. The Mishnah should have said monetary law. For general monetary law, you need 3 hedyotot. General monetary law, that would mean loans and admissions. You need 3 just lay people. Whereas for gezot chabalot, for theft and injury, then you need 3 expert judges. So why don't the Mishnah, if that's such an important distinction, so say all that instead of just leaving loans out altogether? And how are we supposed to figure all that out? And if you still want to read it the way you did Rabbi Abhu, then it would have been cleaner to say Dineh mamonot gezelot v'chabalot bishlosha. Why do you repeat shelosha twice? Right? Because it sounds like demonot bishlosha, that's one category, and then gezel chabalot bishlosha is another category. And so if it's 2 separate categories, you should have read it like this: shlosha diotot and shlam muchin. If it's all talking about one category, and this is a subcategory, then don't write the word 3 the first time. Don't say demonot bishlosha. Just write mamonot. What kind of mamonot? Gezelot v'chabalot. Those you need 3, and then I would know you're talking about just one category. And therefore, the Bi'abu does not fit in to the Mishnah. Ela amar Rava tarte katane mishum d'Rabbi Chanina. Rather, Rava says, I'm going to read the syntax of the Mishnah differently than Rabbi Abhu did. He's going to read it as 2 separate clauses. And actually, he's going to say that the second question that we asked against Rabbi Abhu, in a way, can answer the first question. And that is, why would you say three twice? If you're saying 3 twice, that means it's 2 separate clauses. And so, in fact, he's going to revive this reading that says, Dineh manot bishlosha. And so that first clause is talking about loans. Now, it doesn't say shlosha hedyotot, but since it says 3 twice, obviously he's talking about 2 different types of 3s. So the first clause is the general one, referring to monetary laws, is talking about loans. Probably most monetary laws cases that come up are about loans and admissions, and so that you need 3, and 3 in the Mishnah means 3 lay people. And then another clause that regarding gezelot v'chabalot, theft and damages, that's also 3, but a different kind of 3. For that you need 3 experts. Okay, so therefore now we have a new reading according to Rava. However, Rava agrees that in principle, or mideoraita, you need 3 expert judges. And then the rabbis were lenient for loans. Okay, so all that, let's put away as Rava's reading. And now we have an alternate understanding. Rav Acha bered Rav Ika Amar. He's going to agree that there's 2 separate clauses in the Mishnah. So he's reading the syntax of the Mishnah the same way that Rava did. However, regarding what's deoraita and what's the Rabbanan, he says the opposite. Midoraita had na mekashish. Nemar besedek tishpot amitecha ela mishum yoshebe kedanot. He says on a doraita level, 1 judge is sufficient. If you have 1 good judge, that's all you need. As the pasuk says, in righteousness, you shall judge your neighbor. Tishpot, not tishpetu in plural, but 1. Okay, so therefore, really you only need 1 judge. The problem is, if you require only 1 judge, there's a lot of people that just sit around on the corners and they don't do anything. And they're going to be like, hey, I need a judge. And they'll come and volunteer. And they will come to be a judge. But they are not learned. They don't know anything. In fact, not only are they not expert judges, since they don't even do buying and selling, they don't really even know about the monetary cases that they'd be judging. And therefore, because we don't want, if we say just 1 person, and then the 1 person who comes is going to be this idler on the corner who'll do a bad job, and that's why we say, the rabbis say, you know what, we need 3 judges. Now we ask, Atu bitlata mi la havu yoshbe keranot? We says, well, even requiring 3, how will that help? If you just say, I need 3 judges, then you might still get 3 idlers now you have 3 people that don't know anything. And the answer is, no, if you pick at random 3 people, then it's likely that 1 of them is learned. So it's good to have 3, at least 1 is learned, and 1 learned judge, even among two others that don't know anything, he'll lead the way and he'll explain it to them as they go along. So now we say, the general rule is that if you have an expert judge who makes a mistake, he doesn't have to pay. But a lay judge who makes a mistake does have to pay. But now if you're telling me that the rabbis themselves authorized lay people to be judges, then if they make a mistake, they shouldn't have to pay, right? And the answer is, no, we're not going to do that, because we want to discourage these idlers from being judges. So if we tell them that if you make a mistake, you don't have to pay, then they're all going to want to be judges, and that'll be worse for the whole system. And instead, we say, listen, you need 3 judges. Hopefully, among the 3, there'll be one who's learned, and a better way and in addition to that, we tell them, if you make a mistake, you're going to be on the line. And so therefore, most of the idlers hopefully will say, I don't want to be responsible. And then that way they won't all volunteer to be judges. And so you could still have lay people. It makes it easier to find judges, and you don't need dirisha and chakira for loans, but you do require 3. So now we ask, what's the difference between the opinion of Rava and Ravacha bered Rav Ika in a practical way? They both say that you need 3 lay judges for loans. Now they got to it in different ways, it's true. Rava said on the Doraita level you need 3 experts, and then the rabbi said, you know what, for loans, they don't have to be experts. Ravacha said on Doraita level you need just 1 judge, and then they said, you know what, we're going to require 3 because of these idlers. But they end up in the same place. So is there any case that there would be a practical difference between them? And there is a difference, and that is the statement of Shemuel. He said, what if instead of 3, only 2 judges adjudicate a case? He says that their decision is valid, but we call it an impudent court, meaning they shouldn't do that lechatechila. But b'diavad, if they did it, then their decision is valid. L'Rava Shmuel. Rava would not agree to that, because Rava says that on the Doraita level you need 3 expert judges. The rabbis only were lenient regarding not being expert. They can be lay people if it's for a loan. But the rabbis never say anything about the 3. You absolutely need 3. That's a Doraita, and the rabbis agree with that too. And therefore, if you have only 2 judges, then we throw out their decision. It's worthless. So they would not agree with Shemuel, because Shemuel says it's valid. Rava would say it's not valid. Whereas the son of Rav Ika would agree with the opinion of Shemuel, because he says that on the Doraita level you only need 1 judge. So good. Now the rabbi said, we want to increase it, you need 3 judges. But b'di'avad, if you only had 2, well, at least you have the Doraita law. So the Doraita law will kick in b'di'avad when you have only 2. You shouldn't do that. It's called impudent, but still their decision will be valid. Nezek v'chasi nezek. The Mishnah next said that for cases of paying full damage and half damage, you also need 3 judges. We ask, nezek hainu chabalot. The Mishnah already said injury, chabalot. Now nezek is one of the things that you pay for injury. If I punch you, then I have to pay a number of 5 things, and one of them is nezek. So nezek, you need 3 judges. Chabalot also, you already said chabalot, you need 3 judges, so I know that for injury, damages is also 3 judges. Why do I have to say nezek specifically? And the answer is mishum dekaba elimitna chatzi nezek tanenami nezek shalem. Because the Mishnah wants to talk about half a nezek. That's if a short tam injures someone, then the owner of the short tam has to pay half nezek. So because it wants to mention that, just for parallelism, to complete the phrase, is nezek and chatzi nezek. Good. Chatzi nezek name hainu chabalot. Okay, now why do you need to mention chatzi nezek? That's also, isn't that payment of damages? My short tam caused you damages, I have to pay you half. That's also within the category of injury. And the answer is Tana mamona v'katane kenasa. The author of the Mishnah wanted to separate out between damages and a fine. When someone has full damages, right, if a person punches someone else, or their shor mu'ad causes damage to someone else, they have to pay damages because they're fully responsible for that, then they have to pay for that loss. However, a shor tam technically doesn't have to pay damages because this animal was tam. There was no way to expect that it was all of a sudden going to lash out like that. Generally, animals don't go and gore people. And so really the owner is not responsible and does not have to pay damages. However, the Torah said, because you know what? Give him a fine. Because otherwise, what sense would it make to have half? If you're liable to damages, pay the whole thing. If not, pay zero. What does it mean, a half? So the half, the reason for the half is to give some extra incentive, an extra warning to the owner of an animal, even a shor tam, to make sure to watch it, right? It's a lower level of watching, but you still have to watch it. So really, it's not that he's responsible for the damages since it's a shor tam, but the Torah says, we're going to give you a fine because still you were negligent in not watching your shor tam. It's interesting. Usually fines we associate with being a d'Rabbanan, but this is a deoraita fine. So that's why the Mishnah wanted to talk about chatzi nezek, because chatzi nezek is not actually included in the category of chabalot, because it's a fine, not damages. Okay, now that this, whether it's a fine or not, is actually subject to a machloket. So your answer works perfectly fine according to the opinion that says that paying half nezek for a shor tam is in fact a fine. But what about according to the other opinion that says that it is damages? Then why bother mentioning it? It should be included in Habala is nezek and also chasi nezek. So you don't have to mention chasi nezek and then you don't have to mention nezek either. Ela aydet akaba ayed mitna tashtome kefel v'tashtome arba'a v'chamisha temamon she'eno mishtalem beroshu tenaname chasi nezek temamon she'eno mishtalem beroshu v'aydet akaba ayed mitna chasi nezek tenanami nezek. Rather, in order to understand the style of the Mishnah, you have to read even further. And because the author of the Mishnah wanted to mention paying double and paying 4 and 5, that's for a thief, he has to pay double, and if he stole an ox or a sheep, he has to pay 4 and 5 times. Well, there, it's not technically what he stole, right? These are added fines, added payments to what he stole. So these cases of paying double, 4 and 5, this is a payment that's not the capital. It's not the original value of the loss that he caused. Interesting, in Hebrew you say mishtalem beroshu. Rosh you can translate as capital, and so rosh and capital have two meanings, both in Hebrew and in English. Rosh, a capital in English means the principal amount, the original amount that he stole, and capital could also mean a head, right? That's what we call capital punishment, means cutting off someone's head, or a capital of a pillar is the top of it. So Rosh also means a head, but it also in this context means the principal amount. So anyway, for double, 4 and 5, where he's paying not only the principal, but added multiples of it. So because the Mishnah, it did have to say that, because there, paying double or 4 and 5 is not damages, right? That's over and above the loss to the victim of the theft. So therefore, because it's going to talk about 2, 4, and 5, it wants to talk about half nezek. Even if half nezek, according to an opinion that says it is damages, nevertheless, it's not the equal amount of the damage, right? It's a multiple of it. Then before it was a double, here it's a half, but still it's a different multiple. So because the Mishnah wanted to mention chasi nezek, because it's not to say equal to the capital, so that's why it had to have chasi nezek. And since he wants to mention chasi nezek to fill out the phrase, he has to mention nezek at all, or nezek also, and that explains nezek and chasi nezek. Even though technically nezek certainly, and according to one opinion, chasi nezek is actually included within the category of chabala. שלושה מנלן, דתנו רבנן, ונקרא בעל הבית אלוהים, הרי כאן אחד. עד האלוהים יבוא דבר שניהם, הרי כאן שניים, אשר ישיעון אלוהים, הרי כאן שלושה דברי רבי יושיע. And so now we go back and ask, what's the derivation that you need 3 judges? Braita says, it's from that paragraph about a shomer who's watching a thing, and then he says, oh, sorry, it was stolen, and yet the matter has to come to the judges. judges. And so it says the owner will come to the judges. So that's one instance. So that means number one, that's judge number one. And then in the next pasuk it says it will come to Ad Elohim Levadosh Shem. So that's the second instance. And then the third one, whoever the judge decides is guilty, as that's the third instance of the word Elohim, and that means three judges. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yoshia. However, Rabbi Yonatan Merishon Techila Ne'emad Ve'en Dorshin Techilot. Rabbi Yonatan says the first one is necessary for its own context. It just has to teach you that when you have such a case of someone who is watching an item and he says it's stolen, that you have to go to a judge. Otherwise, I wouldn't know that this is even an issue. So the first one is required for its context. You cannot learn anything from the first one. Rather, there's only two extra instances of the word judge. So that's how I know that you need two judges. However, you cannot have an even number of judges, because then how are you going to decide? So therefore, since it has to be, we know it's two, but it has to be an odd number, that way we increase it to three. So we get three no matter what, but we do it in two different ways, according to the Bioshia and the Bionatan. And now we're going to discuss there two different methodologies. Nema bedoshin techilot mekami palge. Temor sabar doshin techilot, temor sabar en doshin techilot. What's at the essence of their machloket? They actually derive at the same law. They both agree you need three judges. It's just the question is, how do you derive it from the sources? How do you explain this Pesukim? So maybe the essence of their machloket is whether or not we learn something from the first time something is said. So to be Yoshia says, yes, you can learn it even from the first time, although it's needed for its context. You can also learn something from it. And that's why he has three instances. Biotan says we have to exclude the first one because it's the first one. We need it for the context, and we do not learn anything from the first thing. La dekula alma endoshin techilot. No, everybody agrees that you cannot learn anything from the first instance. It's required for its context. Amalach Rabbi Yoshia imken nema kera nikra valabayit el hashofet ma Elohim shemamina leminyana. Rabbi Yoshia says I am learning something from the first instance, however, because you could have used a simpler word, that the owner should go to the shofet. Why does he have to use a different word, the more unusual word for judge, El Elohim? So that's how he's learning two things. Just for the context, it could have said hashofet. If it says Elohim, that means one judge, then two, then three. So that's why he says it that way. How come Bionatan doesn't agree with that and say that, look, it could have said Shofet, the fact that it says Elohim, so now you should learn something else from that and learn and just agree with the Bioshia's derivation. Why are you not learning from the fact that it used El Elohim instead of El Shofet? And Bionatan explains that the Mishnah is using normal language, that's popularly used, as people say, if you need a case to be judged, go to the judge. And so if they say go to the judge, they may very well say go to the superior judge, and they may use the word Elohim. And so it's just quoting how people talk. Make sure to go to the judge and uses the word Elohim. And that's why it's using that language, not because particularly it didn't use Shofet, and therefore we can learn something from it. You can't learn anything from it because it's just quoting the way normal people talk. And people will talk that way and say, go to the Ha-Elohim, meaning the judge. Now, a question to the Bioshia. How come he disagrees with the methodology of Yonatan? Really, you don't need the first one at all. Just use the second and third one, and that's two, and it can't be even. Doesn't he agree that you cannot have a court with an even number of judges, and that way you could learn it more simply without having to go to the fact that he used this word instead of that word. V'atanya, Rabbi Eliezer ben Osher Rabbi Yosef Galili Omer, Matam lomad lintot acharer rabim lahatot, haTorah amra, selecha betin noteh. Surely, Rabbi Yoshia should agree that you cannot have an even number, because look, we have a braita where Rabbi Eliezer, the son of Rabbi Yosef Galili, learns it from a pasuk. It says that you should veer after the majority to sway, and so the Torah wasn't mean to lintot, to sway. So Torah says you should make sure that the Bet Din is always inclined in one direction, so that whenever they vote, you're always going to make sure. Some people are voting this way, that way. When there's an odd number, then it will sway this way or that way. So you need a swaying court. That means you need an odd number. They learned that from a pasuk. So surely Rabbi Yoshia agrees with that. And so when you say no, not necessarily. Sabah like Rabbi Yehuda, dama shiv'im, did not Sanhedrin gedolai tashel shiv'im ve'achad. Rabbi Yehuda omer shiv'im. No, Rabbi Yoshia could agree with Rabbi Yehuda. He said that a big court, the Sanhedrin, is only 70, as we learned in our Mishnah, that the big court is 71. That was Tanakama. Rabbi Yehuda said it's only 70. He excludes Moshe. Moshe appointed 70 elders. There you go. So you can have an even number of people on a court. And so that's what Rabbi Yoshia thinks, and that's why he needs all three words. Even if he agrees with Rabbi Yehuda, we only know that Rabbi Yehuda says that a large court, the great Sanhedrin, can be 70. But would Rabbi Yehuda say that in smaller courts can be an even number also? We haven't heard him say that. And if you say that, yes, in fact, according to Rabbi Yehuda, it goes down the line, and any size court can be an even number, and Rabbi Yoshia is following that. But actually, that's not true. It says in our Mishnah that if the court makes an error, so then the court brings a korban hatat. And for that and narifat egel, you need 3 judges, according to Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Yehuda says no, you need 5. Now, regarding that Mishnah, V'amrina, and my tamad Rabbi Yehuda, what's Rabbi Yehuda's source to say 5? Because it says v'samchu shanayim b'ziknei shanayim. And Pasuk says that the elders will place their hands on it. It says the word samchu in plural, that's 2. Ziknei is also plural, that's 2. So that's 2 plus 2 is 4. Ve'en betin shakul mosifin alam od echad harei kan chamisha. And you cannot have an even number, so therefore you have to add 1, and that's how you get 5. And that's Rabbi Yehuda himself is saying that. So you see, Rabbi Yehuda doesn't say only that the great Sanhedrin can be, so you see that Rabbi Yehuda thinks that only the great Sanhedrin can be even, but if it's a lower number, then he says it cannot be even. So Rabbi Yoshia, you're trying to learn why you need 3, and you said, oh, I have 3 instances of Elohim, 1, 2, 3, that's how I know. So, but why don't you say in a simpler way, the first one is required first context, and there's only 2, and it can't be even. What, you think you're relying on Rabbi Yehuda, who says a court can be even? Rabbi Yehuda only says that a 70 court can be even, but a lower court, 4 cannot be even. He adds 5, and certainly Rabbi Yehuda would say that 2, that you cannot have 2. You need has to be odd, and you have to add 1. And so therefore, Rabbi Yoshia, you should really agree with the derivation that says it's only 2 instances of Elohim. And that way, and it can't be even, and then just add 1. So where does Rabbi Yoshia think? The Rabbi Yoshia difa mid Rabbi Yehuda. Ve'ilu Rabbi Yehuda b'sandri gedolahu deletle ha b'shabed dinad itle Rabbi Yoshia b'shadinad name letle. Oh no, Rabbi Yoshia, in fact, he's a Tana. He doesn't have to agree. He doesn't have to agree with anybody. He is going further than Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda said that you can have an even number only when it comes to the great Sanhedrin of 70. There, it's okay, you don't need an odd number, but any other smaller betin, it has to be an odd number. But Rabbi Yoshia, he thinks that all the way down the line, even down to 3, it's okay to have an even number. And so he would say if it's 4 people, that's totally fine. Technically, if it was 2, it would be okay. That's why Rabbi Yoshia says, no, I learned it from all 3 instances of Elohim. That's his derivation. Now, what is he going to do with that pasuk that says that you should incline? That means you should have a betin where it will definitely incline one way or another. That has to be an odd number. Rabbi Yoshia could say, that's talking about capital punishment. When it's a capital case, then you have to have an odd number. But for a monetary case, no, you can have an even number. Really? Is that true? For a monetary case, you can have an even number? Shanaim omrim zakai v'echad omer chayav zakai. Shanaim omrim chayav v'echad omer zakai chayav. Ne'ema delak Rabbi Yoshia. We have a Mishnah coming up later in the Masechet that says, if you have in the monetary case, if you have 2 people that say innocent and one says guilty, then innocent. If you have 2 judges that say guilty and only one says innocent, then they'd be guilty. So you see that there's a requirement for an odd number. That's because it's giving all these examples. So you can tell me that this Mishnah is not the opinion of Rabbi Yoshia. It seems to be unanimous. Afilu tema Rabbi Yoshia. No, I can explain that Mishnah is in fact also according to Rabbi Yoshia. מהי תהילה בקל וחומר בדיני נפשות? מה דיני נפשות החמירי? אמר החמה נזיל בתרובה, דיני מנות או כל שכן. And what Rabbi Yoshia is saying here is the fact that not only for dinei mamonot, not only for capital punishment do you follow a majority and you don't need it to be unanimous, that's true also for monetary cases. And he's learning it from a kal vachomer. If capital punishment, which is really strict, and you might think that you need it to be unanimous guilty in order to find someone guilty, as it is in American law, when you have a jury, they all have to say the person is guilty. So you might have thought that capital punishment is serious, and yet the Torah says not so. Lintot, right? That's what we learned from that pasuk, that for capital punishment, it's sufficient to have a majority. For guilt, you need to win by 2, but still, you don't need it to be unanimous. So then all the more so regarding monetary case, which is relatively less serious than capital punishment, it would be sufficient to follow a majority. He's not learning from here that it has to be odd, an odd number. That's not true. It can be an even number for monetary cases. What this Mishnah is teaching, that not only for capital, but also for monetary cases, if you have a majority, that's okay, and you don't need it to be unanimous. But in fact, according to the Rabbi Yoshia, if you have an even number of judges for a monetary case, he thinks that's okay. So therefore, theoretically, if there was only 2 Elohims, then you'd say, fine, only 2 judges. He wouldn't automatically add 1 because it has to be odd. And that's why he has to learn that the first one also counts, because it could have used another different word from the fact that the word that he uses, Ha-Elohim, that's where he derives that you need 3 judges. We now discuss a baraita where we see that this rule that you need 3 judges for a monetary case is actually not unanimous. Teno Rabbanan, dinei mamonot bishlosha. Rabbi omer b'chamisha, kedei sheyigamer adin bishlosha. While Tanna Kama says that for monetary cases you need only 3 judges, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says you need 5. Why? So that by the end, by the verdict, the winner will have 3 judges on their side. So it seems like you have a majority. Out of 5, you'll have 3 versus 2. So we ask about that. What does that mean? If you're looking for a majority, then it's sufficient to have 3 judges, and then 2 will always necessarily follow one way or another, and then you'll have 2 against 1, and you'll have a majority. So why are you saying that you need 3 so that you have a majority of 5? If what you're looking for is a majority, then it's sufficient to have just 3 judges. Hachi kamad, mibnei shegemar din bishlosha, alma kasabar telata ki ketibe bigmar din ketibe. No, this is what it means to say. He wants the verdict to be decided by 3, so that you have 3 people, 3 judges, all deciding the same way. You can think of it as Rabbi saying that he wants a unanimous court. Now, a court, technically is 3 judges, and you want to have 3 judges, a full court. That's what he wants, a full court deciding one way or another. However, if you just have 3 judges, they may disagree. So therefore, we get 5 judges, and that way, no matter what, it could be 5-0, could be 4-1, but even the most balanced would be 3-2, and that way you have 3 people that are deciding one way. And so we see, according to the B, he thinks that when the Torah says 3 times Ha-Elohim, it's talking about 3 at the end. We need 3 judges to deliver a verdict, and that is unanimous. So we need 3 voting the same way. You have to start off with 5, and they can vote any way they want, in order to end up with 3 that will be the same. So it's a little bit like requiring something unanimous, but we have 5, we ignore the 2 that are a minority, and then we have a unanimous court of 3. Megadef ba Rabbi Abhu. Rabbi Abhu ridiculed this idea. Megadef, it's a very strong word. It means like curse. This is more than just a usual disagreement between sages. And Rabbi Abhu is very bothered by this. Ela me'ata, tehe Sanhedrin gedola sricha me'av 41, kedei sheyigamer adin b-71. So according to this logic, Rabbi Abhu says, when you have the great Sanhedrin, and you're saying, well, the Torah said 70, so that would mean you need 70 at the end that are all following the same, voting the same way. So really, you'd have to start off with 141. so that then by the time they vote, you'll have at least 71 that are all deciding the same way. So is that what you're saying? And for a small Sanhedrin of 23 people, so you would say, well, you need 23 by the verdict that are all voting unanimously. In order to achieve that, you need to start off with 45 judges, and then, even if it's the most balanced, you'll have 23. So Rabbi Abu is saying, really, is that if that's how you're explaining it to be, then that means Rabbi would require 141 to get to 71 and 45 to get to 23 at the end. But that's ridiculous. Rather, when the Torah says gather 70 sages, that means at the time of the gathering, from the beginning of the adjudication, you have 70, if you include Moshe, 71, and then they vote and you take a majority of 71, not 141. And so too regarding 23. Look here, the context also. The first one is about gathering. Here it's about the actual judging. The judges will judge, and it says Aidah, that's 10 one way, 10 the other way to save him, to declare innocent. And then we have to add 2 more so that you can win by 2 in a capital case, and then 1 more to make it odd. And so that's talking about during the adjudication, not just the verdict. And here too, the source from which we learn that you need 3 judges says that the owner will approach the judge. That's talking about from the very beginning of the adjudication, not the verdict. And so it doesn't make any sense to say that. It's just, you end up with these very strange and wild conclusions, and it's against the Pisukim. All 3 Pisukim talk about the judges that are either being gathered, or the beginning of the judgment, or during the judgment. They don't say that the verdict has to be that many people. Asher yashi'on Elohim tereh. Ne'emar Elohim lemata v'ne'emar Elohim lema'ala. Ma lema'ala shenayim af lema'ala shenayim. Rather, the explanation of Rabbi is as follows. In the second pasuk, 22:8, that has the word Elohim twice in it, so let's forget about the first one. Maybe you need that for the context. The second one says Yarshi'on, which is a plural verb, and Elohim formally is a plural noun. Now, when it's referring to Hashem, then you always use a singular verb, like Bereshit bara Elohim. So you see that although it's a plural form from the verb, you can tell that it's talking about one God only, right? It's one monotheistic God. Why is Hashem called Elohim in plural is a good question. It could seems like it could be tricky. One idea is that it might be is that whereas beforehand pagans used to believe in many gods, and there's a god for this and a god for that, with all different powers, we take all the entire pantheon and all those powers and all that, and we call the whole thing Elohim, and we make it one. And so that's by saying Bereshit bara. In the singular verb, Elohim it refers to all of the powers that Hashem is in charge of. One being, one Hashem is in charge of everything. Anyway, for whatever reason, even though when Elohim refers to Hashem, it uses a singular verb. Here, Asher yashi'on Elohim, Yarshi'on is a plural verb. Otherwise, it would say Yarshia. There's actually a very good proof that the word Elohim here is not Kodesh, but rather it refers to judges. So, since Elohim here is plural, that's referring by itself to 2 judges. Ne'emar Elohim lemata. The continuation of the pasuk says also Elohim, and so that's parallel to the first one, and so that is also plural, and that just like the one above was referring to 2, so to this one is referring to 2. So now we know that you need at least 4 judges. Ve'en betin shakul. You can't have an odd number. Mosifin al modechad erekan chamisha. So we'll add 1 more to get an odd. We can't have an even number of 4, so we add 1 more to get an odd number of 5. That is the derivation of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, and in fact, it's not because he needs, to end with 3 or anything like that. Yeah, and so there's no problem with the others. Of the 23 can stay 23, and the 71 can stay 71. Here, it just so happens that it says Elohim in plural twice. So that's 4 plus 1 is 5. V'Rabbanan, Yashiun Kitiv. Rabbanan, what are you going to do with this plural noun? How come you don't take that as 2? He says, well, actually, it's a Kriuktiv. It's written written chaser. It's written yarshi'an. So if it had a vav in it, yarshi'on, then yes, you have to read it as a plural. But since it's missing a vav, and that's only the nikudot, which are just part of the oral law, not written in the Torah, make it a plural, but it doesn't have a vav in it. So because it's chaser, so it's saying, oh, there's something missing here. Don't read it as a plural, but rather read it only as a singular. And so therefore, Elohim refers to one judge. The one at the end of the pasuk refers to one more judge. And so that's it. You only have two, and then you have 2 plus 1 to make it odd, or if you count the first one, like Rabbi Yoshiyahu does. Baruch Adonai leholam, amen ve'amen.